All right, everyone take their seats. Looks like we've got a full classroom today. I'm going to take attendance real quick. Sarah?
Here.
Matt?
Here.
Oh, we are all here today. We have a big classroom. We got an important lesson. Me and my colleagues, we're going to be going over a three-part mini-series for you guys. We're going to be going over the branches of government. The first branch that I'm going to really hit on today is going to be the executive branch. So what I want you to do, I want you to take out a piece of paper at your desk and a pencil. By yourself, we're going to take a little pre-quiz. We're going to go over this. We're going to see what you know about the branches of government so far. And then at the end, we're going to go over this quiz again, see what you learned from my teaching today. So the first question, now that you got your pencil and paper out, how many branches of government are there? Once again, just jot it down. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, we're going to go over it at the end. What are the names of these branches? Who is the head of our executive branch? What is the main purpose of the executive branch? Who is the second in line leader of the executive branch? And who is the current leader of our executive branch? And we're going to do some true-false. Once again, answer true or false. The executive branch has the most power, true or false. There are multiple departments under the executive branch. The executive branch only employs around 100 people in the USA. And the executive branch creates and puts through every law alone. So once again, just take a few moments, put down your answers there. Once again, doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. We're going to go through it again at the end, and we're going to see how you did, and what you learned, and where you improved, and what you actually learned today. Alright, we're going to play a short little video for you now. This video is going to be on the branches of government. We're going to hit on all three, just give you a short little background on all three branches before we dig into the executive branch.
Have you ever wondered who has the authority to make laws or punish people who break them? When we think of power in the United States, we usually think of the president, but he does not act alone. In fact, he is only one piece of the power puzzle, and for very good reason. When the American Revolution ended in 1783, the United States government was in a state of change. The Founding Fathers knew that they did not want to establish another country that was ruled by a king. So the discussions were centered on having a strong and fair national government that protected individual freedoms and did not abuse its power. When the new Constitution was adopted in 1787, the structure of the infant government of the United States called for three separate branches, each with their own powers, and a system of checks and balances. This would ensure that no one branch would ever become too powerful, because the other branches would always be able to check the power of the other two. These branches work together to run the country and set guidelines for us all to live by. The legislative branch is described in Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. Many people feel that the Founding Fathers put this branch in the document first because they thought it was the most important. The legislative branch is comprised of 100 U.S. senators and 435 members in the U.S. House of Representatives. This is better known as the U.S. Congress. Making laws is a primary function of the legislative branch, but it is also responsible for approving federal judges and justices, passing the national budget, and declaring war. Each state gets 2 senators and some number of representatives, depending on how many people live in that state. The executive branch is described in Article 2 of the Constitution. The leaders of this branch of government are the President and Vice President, who are responsible for enforcing the laws that Congress sets forth. The President works closely with a group of advisors known as the Cabinet. These appointed helpers assist the President in making important decisions within their area of expertise, such as defense, the Treasury, and Homeland Security. The executive branch also appoints government officials, commands the armed forces, and meets with leaders of other nations. All that combined is a lot of work for a lot of people. In fact, the executive branch employs over 4 million people to get everything done. The third branch of the U.S. government is the judicial branch and is detailed in Article 3. This branch is comprised of all the courts in the land, from the federal district courts to the U.S. Supreme Court. These courts interpret our nation's laws and punish those who break them. The highest court, the Supreme Court, settles disputes among states, hears appeals from state and federal courts, and determines that federal laws are constitutional. There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and unlike any other job in our government, Supreme Court justices are appointed for life, or for as long as they want to stay. Our democracy depends on an informed citizenry, so it is our duty to know how it works and what authority each branch of government has over its citizens. Besides voting, chances are that sometime in your life you will be called upon to participate in your government, whether it is to serve on a jury, testify in court, or petition your congressperson to pass or defeat an idea for a law. By knowing the branches, who runs them, and how they work together, you can be involved, informed, and intelligent.
All right, right there was a little bit of background, as you can see in that clip. That clip does a good job of hitting some of those questions that we went over in the pre-quiz, so if you were listening, you're going to be able to answer some of those questions again at the end. And now we're going to dig deeper into the branches of government, and more specifically the executive branch. The branches of government, as it was stated, it's created to distribute the power and authority among multiple branches. That means we're not going to allow one branch to get too much power. It's all about separating the powers. We don't want one person to have too much power, or one group of people to have too much power. We want all the people to kind of have a say, so that's kind of why it was created. It's used to not allow history to repeat itself. In the case of tyranny and tyrants, which was shown in the past, a lot of our founding fathers came over from Europe, where they were under tyrants and stuff like that, and they didn't want the new land to be settled like that. They didn't want the new system to be like that. They didn't want to have a king who was in control of everyone. They had bad experiences with that. So that's why they're creating the branches of government, so the power is spread out. Checks and balances, that's what it is. Each branch has the right to amend acts on other branches. Every branch checks up on the other branches and makes sure that no one's getting too much power. It's made to preserve the liberties and gives each person a voice to be heard. The laws must pass through all the branches to be passed. So if you want a law to go through in this new system, it's got to pass through all the branches. The legislative, which we'll hear in another segment, is going to be about more making the laws. The judicial will be about interpreting the laws. And today, the executive is going to be more on enforcing the laws. That's what we're going to get into. Introduction here to the executive branch. The power is secured by the President of the United States, and he has an order of power. So, as we were talking about earlier, who is the head of the executive branch? That's going to be our president. Our president's going to be the head of the executive branch. As that was stated in the video, the executive branch is an extremely large branch of government, which the president gets to appoint a lot of the leaders in the branch as well. It employs millions of Americans. The video said over 4 million. That number is getting close to 5 million right now. It's a huge branch of government. The roles, there are multiple roles. It's not just set to one thing or another. We're going to dig into the multiple roles of the executive branch. And when people think executive branch, the main thing they think is White House, President, Vice President. There's a lot more than just that. We're going to dig into that as well. And as I had said before, originally it was created and put in the Constitution, and it was influenced by the experiences with King George III and other European tyrants. Once again, don't want history to repeat itself, didn't want to take over. They didn't want to have a king, just like what was happening in Europe. They wanted to create their own government, more of a fair government that checked on each other and everyone had a say. The branch, obviously, has changed and been modified from when it was created, but the roots kind of remain the same. We'll kind of look into how it changed a little bit from when it started. Mainly it's just adding on a few more roles. Time changed, more things need to happen, roles change. So that's what we're kind of digging into today. So the executive branch. The role is going to be to carry out and enforce the laws. Other things the executive branch is going to do, it's going to conduct affairs with other nations. So they're going to be really tight with communicating with other nations, making sure they're on the same page, sometimes settling disputes that might not be on the same page, but they're going to want to conduct affairs with other nations as well. They can be the source of a law, but they do not create the actual law. People in the executive branch, if they have an idea for a law or think something's good, they can bring it up, but they don't actually create the law. You'll see that comes from a different branch, and we'll go into that in the next period. It's known for putting in decrees, executive order, and regulations. Authority is not given to a cabinet member. Authority is given, to a cabinet member through the president. So he'll put a cabinet member at the head of all these different branches, and they'll be in charge. They're also going to be in charge of making sure the laws in the United States are obeyed. And as I had stated before, they're going to work tightly with other nations, once again, to make sure diplomatically they're on the same page and things are going smoothly with the other nations as well. So those are some of the roles of the executive branch. Some more things about the executive branch. The executive branch is going to be in charge of day-to-day control of the federal laws. The powers, they're going to have to direct the government, to command the armed forces, international powers, chief law enforcement officer, and vetoing laws. These are all responsibilities that come along with being a part of the executive branch. Once again, those powers are broken down. The president oversees a lot of that, but he's going to break it down. He's got cabinets underneath him. He has groups underneath him that are going to take the responsibility of taking charge of the day-to-day operations of all those things. Also, they're going to be in charge of directing the national defense, as I had said, foreign policies, and also ceremonial duties. President of the United States, who's the head of the executive branch, is going to be elected every 4 years. Once again, now you can be elected for 2 terms, so they could serve up to 8 years. And they are going to choose his running mate, who is the vice president. As you see, the vice president is going to be second in charge of the executive branch. We'll dig into that in a little bit. And from the time they're elected in November to taking the spot in office in January, the president is going to make up his staff, and he's going to make up his cabinet members, and these members are all going to be part of the executive branch. As we said before, we were going to talk about modern presidents. They're going to have more power than past presidents. That's because as time has gone on, more tasks have come up, more responsibilities have come up, so the branches have taken on more than they originally were taken on back when it was created. As we had said, it employs almost 5 million people, over 1 million active military personnel, and a number that kind of sticks out there is 600,000 postal service workers. Kind of a cool little fact there. Once again, just a little quote here. The executive branch, the branch of government, is not perfect. It comes under a lot of scrutiny. A lot of people don't agree with it. A lot of people don't think it works. So it takes on a lot of scrutiny from a lot of different angles. But it's a system of government that tries to give everyone a voice. That's the goal of the system. But as you can see, no system is perfect. It's still faced with much adversity. But their attempt is to balance the power in the United States. And you can even see quotes. I just want to quote there: the executive branch has grown too strong, judicial branch is too arrogant, and the legislative branch is too stupid. So there's people always who are going to put down the branches of government and stuff like that, and it's just what happens with the government. But the main thing about our government, we're trying to get a balance, and through balance of powers, so we don't let one group become too powerful. But nothing's ever perfect. As you can see, not everyone always agrees with everything. We're just going to dig in here. Who's the parts of the executive branch? 1, the president. 2 is going to be the vice president. Then we're going to have the executive office of the president, his cabinet, and then the departments. We're going to dig into that in a little bit. We'll go in more in depth on what those departments are. There's the list of them right there. And then there's a collection of federal agencies and corporations used for specific areas. As we had said before, Postal Service is an example. President of the United States. Our current president, as seen right there, is the 44th president of the United States, Barack Obama. He is the head currently of our executive branch. He's also the commander-in-chief, the head of government, and the chief diplomat. Constitution in Article 2 states that the president is in charge of execution and enforcement of laws created by the Congress. He can sign or veto a bill. Once again, can be overdone by Congress 2/3 vote. Once again, another thing involved in the system to make sure one man does not have too much power, so it goes through a bunch of different checks and balances. More on the president. He can sign treaties with other nations. Once again, approved with 2/3 of a Senate vote. He can issue executive orders. He can extend pardons for federal crimes. And there are really only 3 qualifications that are listed for presidency. Must be 35 years of age, be a natural-born citizen, and lived in the United States for 14 years. Here's a few fun facts about the president. The president and the family are going to live in the White House. When you think executive branch, you usually think White House. The White House is the location for the Oval Office, the offices of his senior staff, who he puts together. The president primarily transports with Air Force One, Marine One, and then on ground through an armored limousine. Barack Obama, he's the 44th president, but there's actually only been 43 presidents. Grover Cleveland served as both 22 and 24. Modern day, that wouldn't be allowed. You can't serve like that. Back then, he was able to do it, so that's just a fun fact. Here's the order of the succession. It's really laid out here. If the president were to die, here's the order of succession. Who would take over the executive branch? They go really in depth. Vice President, Speaker of the House, President pro tempore of the Senate, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of Interior, Secretary of Agriculture. There's Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary of Homeland Security. Hopefully, we never have to get down to the Secretary of Homeland Security becoming the head of the executive branch. If that happens, I've got a feeling we're in some sort of trouble. But it's all laid out there, and that's the order of succession if the president would be unable to serve, or if something would have happened to him where he can't serve. A little bit about the vice president, current vice president, as seen. Hopefully you guys know who this is by this time. Joe Biden, as we had said, second in charge of the president of the United States. He will become the head of the executive branch and take over for the president if he no longer is able to do his job. He lives in the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. That's a mansion. It's a nice place also. Some people, it's common to think he actually lives in the White House with the president. That's not the case. They have a place where vice presidents now stay, and they live with their family. The EOP, the cabinet, and the departments. The EOP is the president's staff he puts in place. They're going to communicate to the American people. They'll provide presidential support and promote trade interests. One of the most important things here is they got to do the day-to-day communication to the American people, and providing support to a president who has a lot on his plate is very important for them to do as well. There's going to be 15 executive departments. I had those listed up there before. I'll list them again for you so you can see what those is. Each department's going to have a cabinet member. The cabinet member will be assigned by the president. The president's going to assign the cabinet member to run each department under his regime. Presidents, once again, will get advice from these cabinets and their department heads. Cabinets will meet on a weekly basis, every single week. The role of the departments, as we've said, day-to-day administration and regulation of the federal government, and they're going to work really closely with those other agencies under the presidential authority. And here we go, we got the 15 executive department agencies right here, and then their logos next to them. Alright, now we're going to take out that paper again and we're going to do a little post-quiz. We're going to go over the same questions that we went over before. We're going to see what you have learned and what you didn't know before and you know now. First question, how many branches of government are there? Matt?
3.
Perfect. Alright, number 2. What are the names of these branches? Sarah?
Is it the executive, the legislative, and the judicial?
Perfect. There we go. So we are learning something today. That's good. We're listening. Who is the head of the executive branch? Matt?
President Obama.
President Obama is the head of the executive branch. Yes. What is the main purpose? What are the main purposes of the executive branch? Sarah?
Is it to enforce the laws?
Yes. All right, who's going to be the second in line? If the president is not able to do his day-to-day duties, who is going to take over for the president? Matt?
The vice president.
Vice president. Who's our current vice president?
Biden. Joe Biden.
Correct. True or false? The executive branch, we talked about them first, so they obviously have the most power. Is that correct, Matt?
Yes.
False.
Or maybe not.
False. Tell me why. Tell me why.
I guess because all 3 branches are set up to share power.
Yes, exactly. Because what do we not want to repeat itself?
The tyranny from England.
Exactly. Someone's been listening today. I like that. Multiple departments under the executive branch. That can't be right either. It's just the president, right? Sarah?
That's true.
Yes, there are multiple branches as we went into. There's multiple departments. We went in 15 departments. All the employees as well. 100 people. That's false. Not even going to ask that one. Hit it multiple times. And the executive branch creates and puts through every law alone. True or false?
False.
Why is that?
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances. All right, perfect. That's our first mini lesson right there on the executive branch. Over the next two periods, my two colleagues are going to go in, and we're going to talk about the legislative branch and the judicial branch, and then put it all together under the branches of government. Thanks for coming today. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks for coming today. Glad everybody's settled. Today we're going to be talking for a little bit about the legislative branch. Dr. Steve talked about the executive branch of government in a previous lesson, so we're going to move on to the legislative branch today, which, as I put here, is your voice in government. A couple of questions here. If you just want to take out a piece of paper and a pencil and jot the answers down for yourselves there. What do you know about Congress? The laws of the United States are made by. Congress is made up of how many houses? The upper house of Congress is the blank. The lower house is called. Men and women who belong to the Senate are called. A congressman is a member of the blank. There are blank senators in the Senate. There can be no more than blank congressmen in the House of Representatives. Each senator is elected to office for a period of how many years? And each congressman is elected to office for a period of how many years? We'll come back to those at the end of the lesson here and see how you did. I got a little introduction video here for you to take a look at. Which, like Professor Sarah said, we probably should have previewed first.
The legislative branch is one of the three branches of the U.S. government, and its main purpose is to make laws. The legislative branch is also called the United States Congress at the national level. There are two divisions of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and both of these are elected directly by the people who live in their states. A bill is a proposed law brought to Congress for discussion and voting. There are two ways for a bill to become a law. In the first, and easier way, bills need to be passed by a majority of both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then get the President's approval. If he or she signs it, it becomes law. The second, more difficult way takes place if the President rejects the bill. This is called a presidential veto. In that case, the bill gets returned to the Congress, which will need a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. This is called an override, and if this happens, the bill becomes a law, even without the President's approval. Senate is sometimes called the upper house in Congress. 2 senators from every state are elected to represent their state. This organization lets every state in the country, no matter how big or small, have an equal say in the Senate. Senators must be at least 30 years old and a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years at the time of election to the Senate. A senator's term lasts for 6 years, although senators can keep running for re-election. Besides making the laws, the Senate also gets to vote on the appointment of Supreme Court members that are nominated by the President, as well as the people that the President nominates for his or her cabinet and as ambassadors. In turn, however, the Supreme Court keeps check on the legislative branch by declaring their laws unconstitutional if they do not follow the guidelines of the Constitution. The House of Representatives is sometimes called the lower house. There are 435 representatives in total, and then the total for each state is adjusted every 10 years. The number of representatives for each state depends on the population of each state. The most populous state of California has 53 representatives, while the least populous states of Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, Alaska, and Delaware all only have 1 representative each. One issue with the House, however, is that it is still not quite proportional. California has 66 times as many people as Wyoming, but only 53 times as many representatives. Each representative serves a 2-year term before he or she has to run for re-election. Representatives have to live in the state they represent, be at least 25 years old, and have been a citizen of the United States for the past 7 years. While all bills have to be passed through the House, any bills that raise revenues, meaning taxes, must originate in the House of Representatives. When a Supreme Court justice, the President, Vice President, or a cabinet member breaks the law or acts inappropriately, the House of Representatives can vote to impeach him or her, which means to accuse them of a crime. Then they will send them to the Senate for a trial where the Senate decides to acquit them if they find them innocent, or convict them if they find them guilty. If found guilty, the accused is automatically removed from their position. So why do we have two different groups make the laws instead of one? It would probably be easier to get bills passed into laws with only one of them. But the two organizations were a compromise for the original big states who wanted representatives chosen by their population size, like the House of Representatives, and the small states who wanted all states to have equal say, like the Senate. Finally, keep in mind that these organizations are similar to legislative bodies at the state level and even the city or county level. There are state legislatures that make state laws and city or county legislatures that make up city or county laws. Broadly speaking, a legislative organization is anything that creates laws and rules.
All right, so like the video said there, there's state, there's local, there's all kinds of different legislatures. All it means is that they're the people who create the laws. Back to my, Okay, so who makes up Congress? The U.S. Congress is a bicameral legislature, bicameral meaning two houses, it's split, of the federal government of the United States, consisting of two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Congress meets in the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Both representatives and senators are chosen through direct election, although vacancies in the Senate may be filled by gubernatorial appointment. Members are affiliated to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and only rarely do third party or as independents. Congress has 535 total voting members, 435 representatives, and 100 senators. The members of the House of Representatives serve two-year terms representing the people of a district. Congressional districts are apportioned to states by population using the United States Census results, provided that each state has at least one congressperson. Each state, regardless of population, has exactly 2 senators, and at present there are 100 senators representing the 50 states. Each senator serves a 6-year term with terms staggered, so every 2 years, approximately 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. The power for the legislature and the creation of the legislature comes from Article 1 of the Constitution, which states that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. The House and Senate are equal partners in the legislative process. Legislation cannot be enacted without the consent of both chambers. However, the Constitution grants each separate chamber some unique powers. The Senate ratifies treaties and approves presidential appointments, while the House initiates revenue-raising bills. The House initiates impeachment cases, while the Senate decides the impeachment cases. And a 2/3 majority of the Senate is required before an impeached person can be forcibly removed for office. Government powerlessness led to the Convention of 1787, which proposed a revised constitution with a 2-chamber or bicameral Congress. Smaller states had argued for equal representation for each state. The 2-chamber structure had functioned well in state governments. As the 2-chamber structure had functioned well in state governments, the larger states, as the video explained, wanted proportional representation. So a compromise plan was adopted with representatives chosen by population benefiting the larger states and 2 senators each chosen by state governments. That was changed, I think, with the 17th Amendment, where the senators were moved to national or normal elections instead of being selected by the governor. To protect against the abuse of power, each branch of government, the 3 branches, executive, legislative, and judicial, had a separate sphere of authority and could check other branches according to the principles of separation of power. Furthermore, there were checks and balances within the legislature since there were 2 separate chambers. The new government became active in 1789.